Welcome back once again. With us now live over the phone, His Excellency Ambassador Youssef Zada, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good morning, Your Excellency. Hello?
Yes, good morning, Sandra.
Good morning to you. First of all, let us shed light over the participation of His Excellency, the Head of State, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and the Global Compact Financing Summit in Paris, and also participating in the first session. What is the importance of his participation in this global summit amongst top world leaders?
Yes, well, this summit is very important here in Paris. It's called a Nouveau Pact Financier Mondial, or a new global financing pact. Now, as we all know, the relations between France and Egypt has been progressing very firmly throughout the past years, especially with President Macron as President of France, and the special relationship between the two presidents. Now, the participation of Egypt becomes very important because we hosted COP27, the climate change conference in Sharm el-Sheikh in November last year, and it is President Macron who really suggested convening this summit, and he laid out a strategy during this summit which is identical to some of Egypt's policies that comprise defending the rights and interests of the nations of the South in the international arena. Also, it concludes the hosting of the COP27 summit where Egypt demanded the facilitation of requirement of funds for the developing nations, for the green projects, them being the most effective. Furthermore, France realizes the importance of Egypt in Africa and the African continent as a whole, and Egypt's role in this context, especially those pertaining to achieving stability and security in the continent and in the region.
What would be the most important points, or what are the most important points in this session?
Well, the most important points in the session are talking about a new financial order in the world, and to be more just and collective system to address poverty, climate change, and the preservation of the environmental diversity. Also, the summit aims at bolstering the efforts for assisting vulnerable states to be able to overcome and confront economic pressures and the ramifications of climate change. The summit comes in a series of meetings of world leaders that would continue to the end of this year. For example, the G20 chaired by India, the annual World Bank and IMF meetings in Marrakesh, the UN Secretary General Summit in New York on the goals of sustainable development, and the COP28, which will be convened in Dubai later this year. So the summit is really an opportunity to formulate the principles of reforms, future reforms, and the new paths for financial partnerships between the nations of the South and the North, and paves the way to conclude agreements that would help restrict the problems of indebtedness and allow more nations to access for finance it requires for investment in sustainable development, and to help preserve better nature and limit the carbon emissions and protect the populations from ecological crisis, especially in the most vulnerable regions.
Right. The President addressed the roundtable to a new way green growth partnerships within his participation in the summit in Paris. He said developing countries were the most being impacted by climate change repercussions during the past years. He also stressed that the green growth is not a substitute to sustainable development, but rather as a catalyst. He added that African countries are most affected by climate change. If you like to elaborate over that important point related by the President.
Yes, thank you. Well, the President wished to concentrate on the many issues that are related to the developing countries, especially, as you said, a better access to financial flows that are required in light of the economic challenges that these nations are facing because of the current economic crisis. Also, the affirmation of helping the developing countries in achieving its goals for sustainable development 2030, Another point, the commitment the developed nations have according to the Paris Agreement for climate change. This was adopted, I think, by 196 countries, as I remember, in December 2015. Another important point, the President was shedding light on the accomplishments of Egypt after hosting COP27 in November of last year, and the Egyptian experience in tackling the important issues of climate change and the expansion of use of renewable energy. I would like to say also that the President's speech entitled The New Method, the Partnership for Achieving Green Growth, was a session administered by the French Foreign Minister, Catherine Colonna, with the participation of the Presidents of Congo, Denis Sassou, and Lugiso, Mr. Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, President Ramaphosa of South Africa, President of Colombia, and of course the President of the European Commission, who was seated next to the President, Madam Ursula von der Leyen. The civil society organizations also have been demanding that any new international pact should include major changes to the financial aid system so as to be more democratic and more just and more sustainable.
Right. Also, the President revealed the Development Bank's policies. He talked about it, and he said it should be developed to maximize their capabilities, and he stressed that decisions must be taken rapidly to prevent a major debt crisis.
This is totally correct. President Sisi also affirmed the Egyptian national experience and that we succeeded in dealing with issues of climate change and the expansion of the use of renewable energy. Well, during the hosting of COP27, the Egyptian efforts yielded a historic deal to create a special fund for compensation for the damages inflicted on the South from the climate change by the big industrial countries.
Right. The President also talked about Egypt, and he said that Egypt is aiming at translating the ambitions and commitments related to climate, and adding that it set an ambitious program for transforming to clean energy resources. And already we have come a long way in that particular fight.
Quite right. The President also addressed the program that we are proud of in Egypt, the program of Novi. And he talked about the Egyptian efforts made ever since the COP27 summit held in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh, and also the pledge of Egypt to continue using its resources to a green climate. Remember that in COP27, Egypt also made a dramatic investment of an agreement to reach $100 billion from the developed countries, and the Paris meetings would come to help continue implementation of this. So Egypt is now considered one of the main countries spearheading the incentives for green hydrogen. I would like to point out that there is a mega project which will produce 15,000 tons of green ammonia. Also, the government gives the generous tax credit up to 55%. So all of this under a new bill issued last month for the green hydrogen project. And I think it was important that the President Sisi was highlighting the Egyptian efforts in sustainable development and the green environment.
Right. Your Excellency, to what extent does this summit contribute to create and enable environment for the private sector in areas like sustainable infrastructure and areas like financing small and medium enterprises, other areas like innovative financing tools to meet the challenges probably facing vulnerable groups and ensuring more reliable information and data, you think?
Well, as I said, the developed countries, the big nations, the economic powers, are embarking on some sort of adjustment to the world financial system. So we all know that the financial system that was just put in place in 1945 with the Bretton Woods agreements, the World Bank Group, the IMF, and all that, we need to make some amendments every now and then, every few years, pertaining to the sustainable development and all that. And I think this summit comes as a breakthrough in this because it lays the foundation of cooperation between the North and South when it comes to sustainable energy and also the green economy. We all know, of course, the president talked about also the impact of the Russian-Ukrainian war, of the COVID crisis, of the current economic crisis as a whole, that is affecting all countries of the world, and especially the impact on the developing countries. So I think this conference is so important, and I'm very glad that Egypt was one of the main contributors and participants in this conference, because we laid out to the world our plan, what we did, what we accomplished, and what we are still accomplishing. So the conference is very important when it comes to putting a cornerstone for a new economic system and financial system, rather.
How important is the visit in supporting and strengthening the cooperation and partnership between Egypt and France?
Well, relations between Egypt and France have been always strong, and as we all know, as Egyptian citizens here living in this country, that France has been investing heavily in Egypt. We have the subway system, we have major energy projects, we have certain loans and certain environmental projects. So the Egyptian participation comes, and we don't speak on behalf of Africans, because there are African presidents attending the meeting. But I think our participation is very important, because Egypt was one of the major countries affected by for example, the war in Ukraine. We all know that we have a shortage of supplies of grains. We also inflicted damages on the chains of transportation to the country and all that. So to make a long story short, I think Egypt's participation was important to speak on behalf of the developing countries, especially the countries that are dependent on foodstuffs from abroad, or rather depending a little bit on that, and explaining the vision for improving the financial system, the global financial system, to help the developing countries and work together between the South and North to accomplish a more sustainable system.
Right, Your Excellency, Ambassador Youssef Zada, former Assistant Foreign Minister, would like to thank you so much talking to the Breakfast Show.